Hello there, and welcome to another quiet night of sleepy science. Tonight, we are looking at the tiny world of the tardigrade, the little animal often called a water bear or a moss piglet. It is so small that most people need a microscope to see it clearly. It has 8 short legs, a soft, rounded body, and a slow way of walking that can look almost clumsy. Yet this small animal has become famous because some species can survive conditions that would stop many other living things. The tardigrade story begins in ordinary places: moss after rain, lichen on stone, soil between roots, pond water, wet sand, and the thin films of water that collect on small surfaces. Then the story widens. It reaches into dry air, frozen places, laboratory chambers, radiation studies, and experiments beyond Earth. The important thing to remember is simple. The animal is not a superhero. It is a real body with real limits. Its strength comes from biology, not from magic. In this video, we will move slowly through the life of the tardigrade. We will look at how it walks, where it lives, what it eats, how it grows, how some species dry into a ton, and why scientists study its unusual survival states. The facts will stay calm and clear. You do not need to memorize them. Let them pass like small shapes in a drop of water. If you enjoy this kind of calm science, you are welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a quiet thought below. But for now, there is no hurry. Settle in. Let the day move farther away. Let your breathing slow a little. And when you are ready, let us begin with the small, patient world of tardigrades. A tardigrade is a real animal, not a tiny myth from a science book. It belongs to its own phylum, a major branch of animal life, and it is usually seen only with the help of a microscope. Under magnification, the body looks plump and soft, with a head end, a rounded back, and 4 pairs of short legs. This detail about tardigrade, real animal, tiny myth, matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. It gives the listener something exact to follow while the pace remains slow. The first quiet surprise is that something so small can feel so complete. For a night listener, tardigrade, real animal, tiny myth is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. The nickname water bear comes from the way tardigrades walk. The name does not mean they are related to bears, it simply captures the gentle, lumbering shape of their motion. Their movements can look slow, padded, and slightly clumsy, as if a miniature bear were exploring a forest made of moss stems. You can let nickname water bear comes from pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. For nickname water bear comes from the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. That is a simple idea, but it makes the hidden world easier to picture. A nickname can sometimes make science easier to hold in the mind. The name tardigrade means slow walker. It comes from words that point toward a slow step, which suits the animal's unhurried motion very well. The picture of name tardigrade means slow walker does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. In a drop of water, it may reach forward with one soft leg, then another, pulling itself over tiny grains and plant cells. The useful part of name tardigrade means slow walker is that it does not need drama to hold attention. It is enough to imagine the animal doing one small thing well. The animal seems to move at the pace of a thought before sleep. Most tardigrades are tiny enough to live in places we usually overlook. A clump of damp moss can be a forest to them, with open spaces, surfaces, food, and shelter. A fact like most tardigrades tiny enough live also keeps the science honest. The tardigrade is impressive because it has limits, needs, and working parts, not because it is outside nature. The world becomes much larger when the observer becomes very small. Many are only a fraction of a millimeter long, and even larger ones remain small by human standards. If the room is quiet, most tardigrades tiny enough live can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Tardigrades need water when they are active. They may be famous for surviving dryness, but ordinary active life still depends on a thin film of liquid around the body. In that little layer of water, they crawl, feed, sense their surroundings, and continue the quiet business of being alive. When you think about tardigrades need water when the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. That makes the story calmer and easier to believe. Their toughness begins with a very simple need. The body of the tardigrade makes tardigrades need water when they feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Moss is one of the classic places to look for tardigrades. If you imagine each green strand as a tree, then the tardigrade is walking through a hidden forest under your fingers. A patch of moss can hold moisture in tiny spaces, creating a miniature wetland even when the larger world seems dry. There is no need to turn moss, classic places look tardigrades, into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The quiet lesson in moss, classic places look tardigrades is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A small body can still have a full set of problems to solve. The small world is often closer than it feels. Lichens can also shelter tardigrades. Lichens cling to rocks, bark, walls, and old surfaces, and they can hold small pockets of moisture after rain or mist. A simple phrase like lichens also shelter tardigrades can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. To a tardigrade, a lichen crust may be a landscape of ridges and valleys, with enough water for slow movement when conditions are right. With lichens also shelter tardigrades, the scene can stay very simple: a surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The mind does not have to run after the fact. It can rest beside it. A rough stone can become a quiet habitat. Some tardigrades live in freshwater. In these places, the tardigrade does not need to wait for rain in the same way a moss-dwelling species might. The science behind some tardigrades live freshwater is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Tardigrades are tough, but they are still animals, and that is what makes them worth listening to. Even a still pond can contain a hidden animal city. Ponds, streams, and wet sediments can contain species adapted to life in liquid environments. In a calm voice, some tardigrades' live freshwater can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Some tardigrades live in the sea. Marine species can be found among sediments, algae, and tiny spaces along the ocean floor. They remind us that the tardigrade story is not only a story of moss on land, but also a story of salt water and dark grains of sand. There is a soft kind of focus in some tardigrades' life. It points to one corner of the living world, lights it briefly, and then lets the night become quiet again. The same small body plan can belong to many kinds of worlds. For a night listener, some tardigrades' live is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Tardigrades have 8 legs, but their legs are not like the long legs of insects. The result is a slow, pressing kind of walk, more like hugging the ground than stepping above it. They are short, soft, and lobed, and they carry the body close to the surface it is crossing. You can let tardigrades have 8 legs there pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The more slowly we consider tardigrades have 8 legs there, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. What looks tiny to us can be a complete landscape to the water bear. Even movement can be designed for a very tiny scale. Many tardigrades have claws at the ends of their legs. The exact shape of the claws can differ from species to species, and researchers use these details to help identify them. The picture of many tardigrades have claws ends does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. Under a microscope, the claws can look delicate, curved, and surprisingly elegant. A point like many tardigrades have claws ends is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The extreme facts become easier to trust when the everyday facts are clear. A creature smaller than a dot can still carry beautiful details. The tardigrade body is covered by a cuticle. The old covering can be left behind, like a tiny suit that no longer fits. In the story of tardigrade body-covered cuticle, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. The language can stay plain, while the image under the microscope remains strange enough. Growth, even in the smallest animals, means leaving something behind. This outer layer gives shape and protection, and like many animals with a cuticle, tardigrades must shed it as they grow. If the room is quiet, tardigrade body-covered cuticle can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Tardigrades molt during their lives. When the cuticle is replaced, the animal passes through one of the many quiet cycles that shape its small existence. Some tardigrades may even lay eggs inside the shed cuticle, turning the old layer into a strange little nursery. This detail about tardigrades' molt during their lives matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. It gives the listener something exact to follow while the pace remains slow at this hidden scale. The cast-off body covering can become part of the next beginning. The body of the tardigrade makes tardigrades' molt during their lives feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. The mouth of a tardigrade contains slender, piercing structures called stylets. It is not a loud mouth, but a precise one, built for a world where meals are microscopic. These tiny tools help many species puncture plant cells, algae, or small animal prey, depending on what they eat. There is no need to turn mouth tardigrade contains slender piercing into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough, for mouth tardigrade contains slender piercing. The small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. That is a simple idea, but it makes the hidden world easier to picture at this hidden scale. Small feeding tools can be as exact as instruments. Some tardigrades feed on plant cells and algae. They can pierce a cell and draw out its contents, taking nourishment from the small green life around them. A simple phrase like, "Some tardigrades feed plant cells," can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. In moss and wet films, food is often not a large object, but a single cell, full of quiet energy from light. The useful part of some tardigrades feed plant cells is that it does not need drama to hold attention. It is enough to imagine the animal doing one small thing well, at this hidden scale. The meal of a water bear may be a hidden drop of green. Some tardigrades are predators. At our scale, it may sound like a small event, but under the lens, it is a complete ecological interaction. A fact like some tardigrades' predators also keeps the science honest. The tardigrade is impressive because it has limits, needs, and working parts, not because it is outside nature at this hidden scale. Even the smallest worlds have hunters and grazers. Certain species feed on smaller animals or other microscopic life, using their mouth parts to capture nourishment in the tiny world. In a calm voice, some tardigrades' predators can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Tardigrades have a simple but organized digestive system. Food enters through the mouth, passes into a muscular pharynx, then moves through the gut. The body may look soft and almost toy-like, but inside it is arranged for sensing, feeding, digesting, and surviving. When you think about tardigrades have simple, organized digestives, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. That makes the story calmer and easier to believe at this hidden scale. A tiny animal is still an animal with its own inner rhythm. For a night listener, tardigrades have simple, organized digestives is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Many tardigrades are transparent or partly transparent. This gives them a ghostly beauty, as if the animal were made from a soft, living window. Their bodies can allow light to pass through, so researchers can sometimes see internal structures under a microscope. You can let many tardigrades, transparent, partly transparent, pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The quiet lesson in many tardigrades, transparent, partly transparent, is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A small body can still have a full set of problems to solve at this hidden scale. Transparency makes the hidden body feel gently visible. Their colors can be subtle. Some tardigrades appear clear, white, yellowish, greenish, reddish, or brownish, depending on species, food, and body contents. The picture of their colors subtle does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. The colors are usually not loud. They feel more like the muted tones of damp moss, soil, and water. With their colors subtle, the scene can stay very simple: a surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The mind does not have to run after the fact. It can rest beside it at this hidden scale. Tiny animals often borrow the mood of their surroundings. Tardigrades are not insects. This is one reason they feel so strange. They are familiar enough to look like little creatures, but different enough to seem from another page of nature. The science behind tardigrades insects is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Tardigrades are tough, but they are still animals, and that is what makes them worth listening to at this hidden scale. The animal tree has many quiet branches. They are separate from insects, spiders, worms, and crustaceans, although they are part of the wider animal tree that includes molting animals. If the room is quiet, tardigrades insects can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Researchers have described many species of tardigrades. The exact count changes as scientists discover and classify more of them, but more than 1,000 species are known. Each species may carry differences in claws, mouth parts, habitat, body shape, eggs, and survival strategies. There is a soft kind of focus in researchers have described many species. It points to one corner of the living world, lights it briefly, and then lets the night become quiet again at this hidden scale. A name like water bear hides a whole crowd of small lives. The body of the tardigrade makes researchers have described many species feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. New tardigrade species are still being found. A piece of moss, a patch of lichen, or a sample of sediment may contain an animal that science has not fully described before. Because they are small and often live in overlooked habitats, there is still much to document. There is no need to turn tardigrade species still being found into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The more slowly we consider tardigrade species still being found, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. What looks tiny to us can be a complete landscape to the water bear at this hidden scale. Discovery does not always require a distant planet. Sometimes it begins in a damp corner. Tardigrades are often described as extremotolerant, not simply extremophiles. This distinction matters because many do not seek extreme places as their preferred home. A simple phrase like tardigrades, often described extremotolerant, simply can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. They often live in ordinary moss, soil, leaf litter, freshwater, or marine sediments, while their survival powers help them endure when conditions become harsh. A point like tardigrades, often described extremotolerant, simply is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The extreme facts become easier to trust when the everyday facts are clear at this hidden scale. They are not chasing danger, they are prepared for interruption. The famous survival trick of many tardigrades is cryptobiosis. It is not ordinary sleep, and it is not death. It is a suspended condition for surviving a world that has become temporarily unlivable. In the story of famous survival trick many tardigrades, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. The language can stay plain, while the image under the microscope remains strange enough at this hidden scale. The smallest body learns how to wait. In cryptobiosis, the animal enters a state where normal activity slows so deeply that life becomes almost paused. In a calm voice, famous survival trick many tardigrades can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. One form of cryptobiosis is anhydrobiosis, the survival of drying. When water disappears, some tardigrades lose much of their body water and fold into a compact shape. This dry form can look like a little barrel, quiet and still, waiting for moisture to return. This detail about form, cryptobiosis and hydrobiosis survival drying, matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. It gives the listener something exact to follow while the pace remains slow inside this tiny world. Rain becomes not just weather, but a key turning in the lock. For a night listener, form cryptobiosis and hydrobiosis survival drying is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. The dry resting form is often called a ton. The animal no longer looks like a wandering water bear. It looks like a sealed little capsule of patience. In the ton state, the legs pull inward, the body contracts, and the surface area exposed to the world becomes smaller. You can let resting form, often called, pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. For resting form, often called, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. That is a simple idea, but it makes the hidden world easier to picture. Inside this tiny world, a ton is a pause written in the shape of the body. The ton state helps protect against dehydration. Drying can damage cells, proteins, and membranes, so the body needs more than simple stillness. The picture of state helps protect against dehydration does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. Tardigrades use internal chemistry to stabilize important structures while water is missing. The useful part of state helps protect against dehydration is that it does not need drama to hold attention. It is enough to imagine the animal doing one small thing well inside this tiny world. Survival here is not magic. It is careful biological protection. Some tardigrades produce protective molecules during drying. The details are still being studied, and that uncertainty is part of what makes them scientifically interesting. A fact like some tardigrades produce protective molecules also keeps the science honest. The tardigrade is impressive because it has limits, needs, and working parts, not because it is outside nature, inside this tiny world. The water bear holds answers, slowly, like moss holding rain. Different species may use different molecular tools, including special proteins that help keep cells from collapsing into disorder. If the room is quiet, some tardigrades produce protective molecules can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Tardigrades can rehydrate when water returns. After time in a dry state, moisture can allow the body to unfold, the legs to extend, and movement to begin again. The sight can feel almost impossible as a dry speck becomes an animal once more. When you think about tardigrades rehydrate when water returns, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. That makes the story calmer and easier to believe inside this tiny world. In the tiniest way, water writes motion back into the body. The body of the tardigrade makes tardigrades rehydrate when water returns feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Not every tardigrade survives every drying event. Survival depends on species, life stage, preparation, conditions, and the length and severity of stress. Their reputation can make them sound indestructible, but biology is always more delicate than legend. There is no need to turn every tardigrade survives every drying into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The quiet lesson in every tardigrade survives every drying is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A small body can still have a full set of problems to solve inside this tiny world. The truth is more interesting than the myth because it is alive with limits. Tardigrades can survive very cold conditions in some states. In cryptobiosis, certain species tolerate freezing that would destroy many active animals. A simple phrase like tardigrades survive very cold conditions can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. Their bodies are not choosing the cold as comfort, they are enduring it as a temporary hardship. With tardigrades survive very cold conditions, the scene can stay very simple, a surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The mind does not have to run after the fact. It can rest beside it, inside this tiny world. The cold becomes a season to outlast, not a home to desire. Heat is more complicated for tardigrades than many headlines suggest. Recent studies remind us to be careful with claims that make tardigrades sound impossible to kill. The science behind heat more complicated tardigrades than is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Tardigrades are tough, but they are still animals, and that is what makes them worth listening to inside this tiny world. A gentle correction can be more useful than a loud exaggeration. Some can survive brief exposure to high temperatures, especially in resistant states, but active animals are much more vulnerable. In a calm voice, heat more complicated tardigrades than can sound almost like a bedtime object. Clear, slow, and easy to set down. Tardigrades can tolerate low pressure and vacuum in special experiments. The most famous space-related studies exposed selected tardigrades to the vacuum of space, with some surviving under certain conditions. Direct ultraviolet radiation made survival harder, showing again that the animal is extraordinary but not invincible. There is a soft kind of focus in tardigrades tolerate pressure, vacuum, special. It points to one corner of the living world, lights it briefly, and then lets the night become quiet again inside this tiny world. Even the toughest small body still has boundaries. For a night listener, tardigrades tolerate pressure, vacuum, special is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. The space story made tardigrades famous around the world, but the deeper lesson is not that tardigrades belong in space. It is that life on Earth has invented ways to endure sudden absence and return. When people learned that a microscopic animal could survive exposure beyond Earth, it felt like a message from the hidden side of life. You can let space story made tardigrades famous pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The more slowly we consider space story made tardigrades famous, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. What looks tiny to us can be a complete landscape to the water bear inside this tiny world. Space only revealed what moss had already been teaching them. Tardigrades do not actively live in outer space. They can survive certain space conditions in dormant states during experiments, but they still need water and suitable surroundings for active life and reproduction. The picture of tardigrades actively live outer space does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. This keeps the story grounded because survival during exposure is not the same as building a life there. A point like tardigrades actively live outer space is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The extreme facts become easier to trust when the everyday facts are clear inside this tiny world. A pause can cross a harsh place, but ordinary life still asks for a home. Radiation resistance is one of the reasons scientists study tardigrades. Researchers are interested in how DNA, proteins, and cellular repair systems contribute to this resilience. In the story of radiation resistance, reasons scientists study, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. The language can stay plain, while the image under the microscope remains strange enough inside this tiny world. The question is not only what they survive, but how the body remembers how to repair. Some species can tolerate much higher radiation levels than many other animals, especially when dried or otherwise protected. If the room is quiet, radiation resistance reasons scientists study can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. A tardigrade protein called DSUP has drawn special attention. DSUP is short for damage suppressor, and studies have shown that it can associate with DNA and help reduce certain kinds of damage in experimental systems. This does not mean tardigrades give humans superpowers. It means a tiny animal has taught scientists a new way to think about protection. This detail about tardigrade protein called DSUP drawn matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. It gives the listener something exact to follow while the pace remains slow under the soft lens. Good science is careful even when the discovery is exciting. The body of the tardigrade makes tardigrade protein called DSUP drawn feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Some tardigrade protections may involve glass-like states inside cells. This idea helps explain how structures that normally depend on water can remain organized during extreme dryness. When water is absent, certain molecules can help stabilize cell contents, making the interior less chaotic. There is no need to turn some tardigrade protections involve glass-like into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. For some tardigrade protections involve glass-like, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. That is a simple idea, but it makes the hidden world easier to picture under the soft lens. The body becomes still not because nothing is happening, but because disorder is being restrained. Desiccation is a common danger in moss and soil. A tardigrade living near the surface may have food and moisture one day, then drying sunlight the next. A simple phrase like desiccation, common danger, moss, soil, can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. Its extreme abilities may have evolved from the very ordinary problem of a small, wet animal living in a place that dries out. The useful part of desiccation, common danger, moss, soil, is that it does not need drama to hold attention. It is enough to imagine the animal doing one small thing well, under the soft lens. Great resilience can begin with a simple patch of moss. A tardigrade does not need to be large to face a big world. The scale is different, but the challenge is real. A fact like tardigrade does need large face also keeps the science honest. The tardigrade is impressive because it has limits, needs, and working parts, not because it is outside nature, under the soft lens. Tiny size does not make life simple. It makes the world detailed. For an animal that small, a drying moss cushion, a grain of soil, or a change in humidity can be a major environmental event. In a calm voice, tardigrade does need large face, can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Their small size changes how they experience water. A film of moisture that would seem invisible to us can be a moving space for them. They do not need a river to be aquatic. They may only need the thin, wet surface around moss or agility. When you think about their small size changes, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. That makes the story calmer and easier to believe under the soft lens. To a tardigrade, a drop can be a landscape. For a night listener, their small size changes is a good place to rest attention, because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Tardigrades breathe without lungs. This is one quiet advantage of being microscopic. Some systems can remain simple and still work. Because their bodies are so small, gases can move across surfaces and through body fluids without the need for lungs like ours. You can let tardigrades breathe without lungs pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The quiet lesson in Tardigrades breathe without lungs is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A small body can still have a full set of problems to solve under the soft lens. At small scales, the rules of the body change. Their circulation is very simple compared with ours. They do not have a heart pumping red blood through vessels the way mammals do. The picture of their circulation, very simple compared, does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. Their body cavity contains fluid that helps distribute materials across very short distances. With their circulation very simple compared, the scene can stay very simple. A surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The mind does not have to run after the fact. It can rest beside it under the soft lens. A tiny body can run on a softer kind of internal motion. The nervous system of a tardigrade is small but organized. For such a small animal, walking with 8 legs still requires timing and control. The science behind nervous system tardigrades small organized is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Tardigrades are tough, but they are still animals, and that is what makes them worth listening to under the soft lens. Even a slow step needs a quiet signal behind it. It includes a brain-like region and nerve structures that help coordinate movement and response. If the room is quiet, nervous system tardigrades small organized can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Some tardigrades have eye spots. These simple, light-sensitive structures do not see the world as we do, but they can help the animal respond to light and darkness. In a moss forest, sensing light may help guide movement through wet and drying spaces. There is a soft kind of focus in some tardigrades have eye spots. It points to one corner of the living world, lights it briefly, and then lets the night become quiet again, under the soft lens. A tiny eye does not need to see much to matter. The body of the tardigrade makes some tardigrades have eye spots feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Tardigrade walking has become interesting to researchers. Studying how they walk may help scientists think about movement in simple nervous systems and soft bodies. Their 8-legged movement is slow, soft, and surprisingly coordinated for such a small animal. There is no need to turn tardigrade walking become interesting researchers into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The more slowly we consider tardigrade walking become interesting researchers, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. What looks tiny to us can be a complete landscape to the water bear under the soft lens. A small step can become a scientific question. The body plan of a tardigrade is compact. There is no long tail, no wings, no loud armor in the way we imagine large animals. A simple phrase like body plan tardigrade compact can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. Instead, there is a rounded body, short legs, claws, a mouth, and enough inner structure to live in a microscopic world. A point like body plan tardigrade compact is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The extreme facts become easier to trust when the everyday facts are clear under the soft lens. Nature often solves problems without adding extra noise. Tardigrade eggs can be beautifully shaped. Under magnification, an egg can look like a tiny ornament from a hidden world. In the story of tardigrade eggs beautifully shaped, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. The language can stay plain, while the image under the microscope remains strange enough under the soft lens. The beginning of life may already carry a signature. Some species produce eggs with surface patterns, bumps, spines, or sculpted shells that help researchers identify them. In a calm voice, tardigrade eggs beautifully shaped can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Some tardigrade eggs are laid freely, while others may be left in the old cuticle. This variation shows that even small animals have different reproductive strategies. A shed skin can become a safe place where eggs wait for the right conditions. This detail about some tardigrade eggs laid freely matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. It gives the listener something exact to follow, while the pace remains slow for this part of the story. Old coverings can turn into quiet rooms for new life. For a night listener, some tardigrade eggs laid freely is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Young tardigrades look like smaller versions of adults. The same little body plan continues, becoming more capable with each stage. They do not pass through a butterfly-like transformation, but grow by molting and increasing in size. You can let young tardigrades look like smaller pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. For young tardigrades look like smaller, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. That is a simple idea, but it makes the hidden world easier to picture for this part of the story. Growth can be gradual and almost invisible. The tardigrade life cycle depends on moisture. Eggs, young animals, and adults all interact with the presence or absence of water in their surroundings. The picture of tardigrade life cycle depends moisture does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. A wet season may open the world, while a dry period may close it into waiting. The useful part of tardigrade life cycle depends moisture is that it does not need drama to hold attention. It is enough to imagine the animal doing one small thing well for this part of the story. For a water bear, time can be measured by rain. Some tardigrades reproduce sexually. As with many small animals, the behavior may be difficult to observe without patient microscope work. A fact like some tardigrades reproduce sexually also keeps the science honest. The tardigrade is impressive because it has limits, needs, and working parts, not because it is outside nature for this part of the story. The quietest lives still have their own courtship and continuity. Males and females occur in many species, and the details of reproduction can vary across the group. If the room is quiet, some tardigrades reproduce sexually can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Some tardigrades can reproduce without males. In certain species, females may produce offspring through parthenogenesis, where embryos develop from unfertilized eggs. This can help a population continue when partners are rare in a scattered microscopic habitat. When you think about some tardigrades reproduce without males, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. That makes the story calmer and easier to believe for this part of the story. Life often finds a way to continue with the materials at hand. The body of the tardigrade makes some tardigrades reproduce without males feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. The distribution of tardigrades is wide. Their presence does not mean every place is easy for them. It means the group has many ways of fitting into small, wet spaces. They have been found in many parts of the biosphere, from mountain soils to polar regions, from damp moss to marine sediments. There is no need to turn distribution tardigrades wide into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The quiet lesson in distribution tardigrades wide is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A small body can still have a full set of problems to solve for this part of the story. The hidden map of water bears is written in moisture. Polar tardigrades live in some of the coldest regions on Earth. In icy habitats, the rhythm of life may be brief and seasonal, tied to meltwater and small windows of activity. A simple phrase like "polar tardigrades live some coldest" can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. The animal may spend long periods waiting, then become active when liquid water returns. With polar tardigrades, live some coldest, the scene can stay very simple. A surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The mind does not have to run after the fact. It can rest beside it for this part of the story. In a cold world, patience becomes part of the calendar. Tropical tardigrades live in warmer and often wetter places. The same general animal group can belong to both frozen quiet and warm green abundance. The science behind tropical tardigrades, live warmer, often is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Tardigrades are tough, but they are still animals, and that is what makes them worth listening to for this part of the story. A tiny body can cross climate boundaries through adaptation. Mosses, lichens, soil, leaf litter, and water films can provide habitat in rainforests and other humid environments. In a calm voice, tropical tardigrades live warmer, often can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Deep-sea tardigrades remind us that the group is not only terrestrial. Marine sediments and ocean habitats can contain species that live far from sunlight and surface moss. The deep sea changes the mood of the story, carrying water bears into darkness, pressure, and slow marine time. There is a soft kind of focus in deep-sea tardigrades remind that group. It points to one corner of the living world, lights it briefly, and then lets the night become quiet again for this part of the story. The small animal has more than one kind of night. For a night listener, deep-sea tardigrades remind that group is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Mountain tardigrades may live in harsh, changing conditions. For microscopic animals in moss and soil, a mountain is not only a view, it is a set of daily tests. High places can bring cold, drying, strong sunlight and short windows of moisture. You can let mountain tardigrades live harsh changing pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The more slowly we consider mountain tardigrades live harsh changing, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. What looks tiny to us can be a complete landscape to the water bear for this part of the story. Elevation can make a tiny habitat feel extreme. Urban tardigrades can live near people without being noticed. Moss on walls, damp roofs, old stones, garden soil, and tree bark may hold the thin, wet spaces they need. The picture of urban tardigrades live near people does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. A city can be full of hidden animals that no one hears, sees, or disturbs. A point like urban tardigrades live near people is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The extreme facts become easier to trust when the everyday facts are clear. For this part of the story, not all wilderness is far away. To find tardigrades, people often soak moss in water. What looked like ordinary green material may suddenly contain moving animals, eggs, algae, and other microscopic life. In the story of fine tardigrades people often soak, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. The language can stay plain, while the image under the microscope remains strange enough for this part of the story. A simple bowl of water can open a small door. After the moss releases its tiny inhabitants, a sample can be examined under magnification. If the room is quiet, fine tardigrades people often soak can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. The first descriptions of tardigrades came from patient observation. Early naturalists looked through microscopes and tried to name what they saw in this strange, slow animal. The names water bear and slow walker both came from looking closely rather than looking quickly. This detail about first descriptions tardigrades came from matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. It gives the listener something exact to follow while the pace remains slow in this small setting. Science often begins with someone giving attention to what others pass by. The body of the tardigrade makes first descriptions tardigrades came from feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. The microscope changed the human sense of nature. A lens does not create the world, it simply lets us notice a world that was already there. Without magnification, tardigrades remain mostly invisible, even when they are close to us. There is no need to turn microscope-changed human-sense nature into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. For microscope-changed human-sense nature, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. That is a simple idea, but it makes the hidden world easier to picture in this small setting. The hidden animal waits for the eye to become smaller. Tardigrades are sometimes used as symbols of resilience. Their ability to pause during harsh conditions makes them a natural image for endurance. A simple phrase like tardigrades sometimes used symbols resilience can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. But the most accurate lesson is not toughness without limits. It is the wisdom of changing state when the world changes. The useful part of tardigrades' sometimes used symbols resilience is that it does not need drama to hold attention. It is enough to imagine the animal doing one small thing well in this small setting. Resilience can look like softness, folding inward, and waiting. Their survival is linked to preparation. Sudden exposure may be more dangerous than a gradual transition, depending on the species and condition. A fact like their survival-linked preparation also keeps the science honest. The tardigrade is impressive because it has limits, needs, and working parts, not because it is outside nature in this small setting. Even extraordinary survival often depends on timing. A tardigrade often needs time or the right physiological state to resist extreme stress well. In a calm voice, their survival-linked preparation can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. The dry ton is not active life. In that state, the animal is not crawling, feeding, exploring, or reproducing in the usual way. It is more like a biological pause, a way to cross a period that cannot support ordinary living. When you think about active life, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. That makes the story calmer and easier to believe in this small setting. There is a difference between surviving time and living through it awake. For a night listener, active life is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. When conditions improve, activity can return. The return can seem sudden to an observer, but it depends on many small repairs and rebalancing inside the body. Water softens the body, internal processes resume, and the animal may begin to move again. You can let when conditions improve, activity return, pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The quiet lesson in when conditions improve, activity return is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A small body can still have a full set of problems to solve in this small setting. Waking is not one moment, it is a body becoming possible again. Tardigrades can survive without food during dormant periods. When metabolism is deeply reduced, the usual need for constant energy changes. The picture of tardigrades survive without food during does not demand alarm, it asks only for a little patient noticing. This does not mean food is unimportant, it means the animal can wait when ordinary feeding is impossible. With tardigrades survive without food during, the scene can stay very simple: a surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The mind does not have to run after the fact, it can rest beside it in this small setting. A pause can stretch the distance between meals. In active life, tardigrades are not frozen superheroes. Their famous powers are mostly emergency tools, not their everyday personality. The science behind active life tardigrades' frozen superheroes is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Tardigrades are tough, but they are still animals, and that is what makes them worth listening to in this small setting. The legend is loud, but the daily life is quiet. They crawl, eat, molt, respond to surroundings, and live within the usual needs of small animals. If the room is quiet, active life, tardigrades, frozen superheroes, can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Some tardigrades respond to drying by forming a ton quickly. The ability to contract and protect the body can be essential when the thin film of water vanishes. A moss cushion can dry faster than a large pond, so timing matters at that scale. There is a soft kind of focus in some tardigrades respond drying forming. It points to one corner of the living world, lights it briefly, and then lets the night become quiet again in this small setting. For a small animal, weather can arrive in minutes. The body of the tardigrade makes some tardigrades respond drying forming feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Other tardigrades may be less tolerant of drying. Marine or permanently aquatic species may face different pressures than species living in moss that dries and re-wets. The group is diverse, and not every species has the same level of resistance. There is no need to turn other tardigrades less tolerant drying into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The more slowly we consider other tardigrades less tolerant drying, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. What looks tiny to us can be a complete landscape to the water bear in this small setting. Diversity keeps the story from becoming too simple. Scientists study tardigrades partly because they challenge assumptions. They show that an animal body can be small, complex, soft, and still capable of surviving severe stress. A simple phrase like "scientists study tardigrades" partly because can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. This makes researchers ask new questions about cells, proteins, DNA, membranes, and dormancy. A point like scientists study tardigrades partly because is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The extreme facts become easier to trust when the everyday facts are clear in this small setting. A strange animal can become a quiet teacher. Tardigrade research may help improve preservation technologies someday. These possibilities are still areas of research, not promises, but they show why the animal matters beyond curiosity. In the story of tardigrade research help improve preservation, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. The language can stay plain, while the image under the microscope remains strange enough in this small setting. A moss creature may whisper useful ideas to medicine and biotechnology. Scientists are interested in whether lessons from drying tolerance could inform ways to protect biological materials. In a calm voice, tardigrade research help improve preservation can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. The idea of suspended life is older than modern laboratories. Seeds, spores, brine shrimp eggs, and other forms of life can also wait through difficult conditions. Tardigrades belong to this larger story of organisms surviving by slowing down or pausing. This detail about idea suspended life older than matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. Nature has many ways to keep time gently. For a night listener, idea suspended life older than is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. The tardigrade is not a bacterium. This matters because its survival abilities happen inside an animal body, not a single cell. It is a multicellular animal with tissues, a gut, a nervous system, legs, and behavior. You can let tardigrade bacterium pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. For tardigrade bacterium, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. The water bear is tiny, but it is not simple in the way a speck of dust is simple. Tardigrades are not immortal. They can die from stress, age, predation, unsuitable conditions, and failed recovery after dormancy. The picture of tardigrades immortal does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. The popular image of an indestructible animal is fun, but the real animal is more delicate and more believable. The useful part of tardigrades immortal is that it does not need drama to hold attention. Mortality makes its survival more meaningful, not less. The famous phrase, "toughest animal on Earth needs care." Different organisms have different strengths, from heat-loving microbes to deep-sea animals and desert seeds. A fact like famous phrase, "toughest animal Earth," also keeps the science honest. Science is calmer when it does not need a crown. Tardigrades are among the most resilient animals known, especially in dormant states. But no single creature wins every possible test. If the room is quiet, famous phrase, "toughest animal Earth," can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. One quiet lesson from tardigrades is that weakness and strength can share the same body. They need water, they are tiny, and they can be harmed, yet they can also endure conditions that seem impossible. This combination makes them feel almost poetic without needing exaggeration. When you think about quiet lesson from tardigrades that, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. Life does not have to be large to be astonishing. The body of the tardigrade makes quiet lesson from tardigrades that feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Their slow movement can be relaxing to watch. There is no rush in the way it crosses a strand of moss or a grain of sediment. Under a microscope, a tardigrade may pull itself forward with small, steady motions, turning slightly, gripping, pausing, and continuing. There is no need to turn their slow movement, relaxing watch into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The quiet lesson in their slow movement, relaxing watch is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. The animal seems to teach the lens how to slow down. The world around a tardigrade is textured. Moss cells, algae, mineral grains, bits of leaf, and tiny pockets of air or water create a terrain full of obstacles. A simple phrase like "world around tardigrade textured" can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. At that scale, a smooth surface for us may be a mountain path for them. With world around tardigrade textured, the scene can stay very simple: a surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. Smallness makes every surface more interesting. Tardigrades remind us that ecosystems have layers. The visible world rests on smaller worlds, doing their quiet work. The science behind tardigrades reminds that ecosystems have as a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. To understand nature, we sometimes have to lower our gaze. A forest is not only trees, birds, and mammals. It is also moss, fungi, algae, nematodes, rotifers, bacteria, and water bears. In a calm voice, tardigrades remind that ecosystems can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. In a moss habitat, tardigrades share space with many other microscopic organisms. Rotifers, nematodes, protozoans, algae, and microbes may all be part of the same damp miniature community. The tardigrade is not alone. It is one neighbor in a very small neighborhood. There is a soft kind of focus in moss habitat tardigrades share space. Even hidden worlds are social in their own way. For a night listener, moss habitat tardigrades share space is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Some tardigrades have been found in extreme places, but many live in ordinary places. The animal that can survive a space experiment may also be living quietly in moss outside a house. This contrast is one of the best parts of their story. You can let some tardigrades have been found pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The more slowly we consider some tardigrades have been found, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. The extraordinary does not always announce itself. The body of a tardigrade has segments, though they are not always obvious at first glance. The plump shape can hide the organization beneath it, with body regions and leg pairs arranged in a repeated pattern. The picture of body tardigrade segments, though, they does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. The animal looks soft and simple, but its layout has order. A point like body tardigrade segments, though is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. Quiet design can be easy to miss. Tardigrades belong to the molting animals, a larger evolutionary group. Their place on the animal tree helps researchers think about how body plans evolved. In the story of Tardigrades belong molting animals larger, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. A small creature can hold a large evolutionary question. This connects them distantly with animals such as arthropods and nematodes, though they remain their own distinctive branch. If the room is quiet, tardigrades belong molting animals larger can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Fossil evidence for tardigrades is rare. Soft, tiny bodies do not fossilize as easily as bones, shells, or teeth. This means scientists must combine fossils, anatomy, genetics, and comparisons with related groups to understand their deep history. This detail about fossil evidence tardigrades rare matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. The past of a soft animal is often written faintly. The body of the tardigrade makes fossil evidence tardigrades rare feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Some amber fossils have preserved tardigrade-like forms. When a tiny creature is sealed in ancient resin, a hidden life becomes a small window into deep time. Amber can trap small organisms in resin, holding delicate details that would usually disappear. There is no need to turn some amber fossils have preserved into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. For some, amber fossils have preserved. The small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. The smallest fossils can feel like quiet messages. The evolutionary history of tardigrades reaches far back. Exactly how far and in what form is a scientific question, but they are part of an old animal lineage. A simple phrase like evolutionary history tardigrades reaches back can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. Their modern bodies carry both ancient features and specialized adaptations for small, wet habitats. The useful part of evolutionary history tardigrades reaches back is that it does not need drama to hold attention. Deep time can live inside a body smaller than a seed. The phrase moss piglet is another affectionate nickname. The name is playful, but it also shows how easily people connect with their shape once they see them. A fact like phrase moss piglet, another affectionate, also keeps the science honest. A microscope can turn a speck into a character. It captures the round little body and the way some tardigrades nose through wet moss like tiny animals grazing in a green field. In a calm voice, phrase moss piglet, another affectionate, can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Tardigrades can be surprisingly cute under magnification. Their rounded bodies, short legs, and slow steps make them look less alien than many microscopic animals. That charm may be one reason the public remembers them more easily than other tiny creatures. When you think about tardigrades surprisingly cute under magnification, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. Wonder sometimes enters through cuteness. For a night listener, tardigrades, surprisingly cute under magnification, is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Their cuteness should not hide their ecological role. Even if their role is small in a single patch of moss, many small roles together help shape living systems. They feed, are fed upon, move through wet films, and participate in microscopic food webs. You can let their cuteness should hide their past through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The quiet lesson in their cuteness should hide there is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. No creature is only a curiosity. The study of tardigrades requires patience. Researchers may need to collect samples, sort tiny animals, identify species, observe eggs, sequence DNA, and compare small anatomical details. The picture of study tardigrades requires patience does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. This is slow science, built from careful looking rather than loud scenes. With study, tardigrades requires patience. The scene can stay very simple. A surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The pace of the scientist can begin to match the pace of the water bear. Genomes are helping researchers understand tardigrades more deeply. The genome is not a simple instruction book, but it is a rich record of biological possibility. The science behind genomes helping researchers understand tardigrades is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Inside the tiny animal is a library too small to see. By reading DNA sequences, scientists can compare species and investigate genes linked to stress tolerance, development, and body organization. If the room is quiet, genomes helping researchers understand tardigrades can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Not all tardigrades have the same genome size or the same survival toolkit. Different lineages can use different combinations of proteins, repair systems, and physiological responses. This variety makes the group more scientifically useful because it gives researchers natural comparisons. There is a soft kind of focus in tardigrades have same genome size. One name, water bear, contains many solutions. The body of the tardigrade makes tardigrades have same genome size feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. The DSUP protein is not found in every tardigrade in the same way. This careful wording keeps the story honest without making it less fascinating. Scientists study particular species and proteins carefully because one discovery should not be automatically assigned to the whole group. There is no need to turn DSUP protein found every tardigrade into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The more slowly we consider DSUP protein found every tardigrade, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. Precision is a kind of respect. Tardigrade proteins can be unusually disordered in structure. Some protective proteins may not fold into one rigid shape, and that flexibility can help them interact with cellular structures during stress. A simple phrase like tardigrade protein's unusually disordered structure can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. A molecule does not always need to be stiff to be useful. A point like tardigrade protein's unusually disordered structure is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. Softness can be a form of function. Membranes are vulnerable during drying, protective chemistry may help keep those boundaries from falling apart until water returns. In the story of membranes vulnerable during drying, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. A cell survives by protecting its edges. When water leaves, the boundaries of cells can be stressed, squeezed, or damaged. In a calm voice, membranes vulnerable during drying can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Proteins are also vulnerable during stress. Heat, drying, radiation, and other pressures can cause proteins to lose their useful shapes. Tardigrade survival involves keeping enough of the cellular machinery safe or repairing it after conditions improve. This detail about proteins also vulnerable during stress matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. Life depends on shapes that must not be lost completely. For a night listener, proteins also vulnerable during stress is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. DNA is another fragile treasure inside the animal. This is why researchers pay close attention to molecules that help guard genetic material. Radiation and drying can damage DNA, and recovery depends on protection, repair, or both. You can let another fragile treasure inside animal pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. For another fragile treasure inside animal, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. A future body depends on a protected message. Repair after stress may be as important as resistance during stress. Survival is not only about preventing damage, it can also involve fixing what has been harmed when the animal becomes active again. The picture of repair after stress, important resistance does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. The return from dormancy may be a busy period inside the cells, even if the animal looks merely slow. The useful part of repair after stress, important resistance, is that it does not need drama to hold attention. Stillness can hide repair. Tardigrades show that survival can be reversible. This is different from speed, strength, or aggression. A fact like tardigrades show that survival reversible also keeps the science honest. The water bear survives by becoming quiet. Instead of escaping a harsh condition by moving away, the animal changes its body state until the world becomes gentle again. If the room is quiet, tardigrades show that survival reversible can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. The ton state reduces the body's exposed shape. By pulling in the legs and contracting, the tardigrade becomes more compact and less vulnerable to the surrounding air. It is a body posture, a chemical condition, and a survival strategy all at once. When you think about state reduces body's exposed shape, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. Form and function fold together. The body of the tardigrade makes state reduces body's exposed shape feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Some tardigrades can endure strong pressure. These tests help scientists explore the limits of animal cells, even though such pressures are not the usual daily life of moss-dwelling water bears. Experiments have shown that certain species in resistant states can tolerate pressures far outside ordinary conditions. There is no need to turn some tardigrades endure strong pressure into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The quiet lesson in some tardigrades endure strong pressure is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. A laboratory can ask questions that nature does not ask every day. Tardigrades have been used in astrobiology discussions. Because they can survive some space-related stresses in dormant forms, scientists use them as models for thinking about the limits of life. A simple phrase like, "Tardigrades have been used astrobiology," can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. They do not prove that life is common elsewhere, but they help refine questions about survival beyond Earth. With tardigrades have been used to astrobiology, the scene can stay very simple. A surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. a tiny animal can make the universe feel slightly more biological. The moon tardigrade story is often misunderstood. Without liquid water and a suitable environment, they are not building a lunar colony. The science behind moon tardigrade story, often misunderstood, is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. A good story becomes better when it stays truthful. After a spacecraft crash carried dried tardigrades to the moon, headlines imagined them scattered across the lunar surface, but survival in a dry, dormant state is not the same as activity or reproduction. In a calm voice, moon tardigrade story, often misunderstood, can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Tardigrades do not break the rules of biology. They still rely on chemistry, cells, water, energy, and repair. Their abilities are remarkable because they use biology in unusual ways, not because they escape biology entirely. There is a soft kind of focus in tardigrades' break rules biology. Wonder does not need to be supernatural. For a night listener, tardigrades' break rules biology is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. There is peace in how small the tardigrade's world can be. The animal does not need a continent. It needs moisture, food, and time. A damp cushion of moss, a shaded stone, or a bit of leaf litter may contain everything needed for a slow life. You can let their peace, small tardigrade's world, pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The more slowly we consider their peace, small tardigrade's world, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. A world can be complete at any size. Tardigrades make good subjects for sleep science videos because they are strange without being loud. Their story has space, deep time, hidden worlds, survival chemistry, and soft movement. The picture of tardigrades make good subjects for sleep does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. It gives the mind something interesting to hold without demanding alarm. A point like tardigrades make good subjects sleep is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. Curiosity can be gentle enough for night. A single drop of water can reveal them. The tardigrade appears slowly, as if it were already there and only now allowing itself to be noticed. In the story of single drop water reveal them, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. Discovery can arrive very quietly. When moss is soaked and examined, what seemed still may begin to move under the lens. If the room is quiet, single drop water reveal them can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Their legs move in patterns that look almost careful. Each step presses into the surface, grips, releases, and reaches again. Because they are soft and small, their walking has a rounded rhythm, less like marching and more like feeling their way forward. This detail about their legs' move patterns that matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. Slow movement can be its own kind of grace. The body of the tardigrade makes their legs move patterns that feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. A tardigrade's claws can match its habitat. To us, a claw may be nearly invisible. To the animal, it is contact with the world. Different claw shapes may help species grip different surfaces, and those small differences are important to taxonomists. There is no need to turn tardigrade's claws match habitat into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. For tardigrade's claws match habitat, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. The smallest hook can hold a life in place. The mouthparts can also help distinguish species. Researchers examine tiny structures around the mouth and pharynx when identifying water bears. A simple phrase like mouthparts also help distinguish species can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. These details remind us that classification is not only naming, but patient comparison. The useful part of mouthparts also help distinguish species is that it does not need drama to hold attention. A small difference can carry a whole species. Some tardigrades live among algae. The relationship is not sentimental. It is simply one of the quiet arrangements of life. A fact like some tardigrades live among algae also keeps the science honest. Green cells and slow animals share a wet surface. Algae can provide both habitat and food, creating a green microscopic environment where water bears may move and feed. In a calm voice, some tardigrades live among algae can sound almost like a bedtime object. Clear, slow, and easy to set down. Leaf litter can hide tardigrades too. As leaves break down, they create moist spaces filled with microbes, fungi, and tiny animals. What looks like decay from above can be a layered habitat below. When you think about leaf litter hide tardigrades, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. The end of one leaf becomes shelter for many small beginnings. For a night listener, leaf litter hide tardigrades is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Soil is full of tiny water films. Tardigrades may be part of this hidden soil life, living where our eyes see only dirt. Between particles, after rain or in humid conditions, microscopic wet spaces allow small organisms to move and feed. You can let soil full tiny water films pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The quiet lesson in soil full tiny water films is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. The ground is not as solid as it appears. Tardigrades can enter different forms of cryptobiosis depending on the stress. Drying, freezing, low oxygen, or salt stress can involve different physiological responses. The picture of tardigrades enter different forms of cryptobiosis does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. The details vary across species and conditions, which is why scientists continue to study them closely. With tardigrades enter different forms, cryptobiosis, the scene can stay very simple. A surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. Dormancy is not one door, but several. Cryobiosis is associated with surviving freezing conditions. Some tardigrades in resistant states can endure cold by reducing activity and protecting internal structures. The science behind cryobiosis associated with surviving freezing is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. The body learns to become quiet while the world becomes crystal. When temperature drops and water becomes ice, cells face dangerous changes. If the room is quiet, cryobiosis associated with surviving freezing can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. Anoxybiosis is a response to low oxygen. Some tardigrades can become inactive and swollen when oxygen is limited, then recover when conditions improve. This shows that their dormancy strategies are not only about dryness, but about several kinds of environmental interruption. There is a soft kind of focus in anoxybiosis response oxygen. Life can pause for more than one reason. The body of the tardigrade makes anoxybiosis response oxygen feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Osmobiosis is linked to stressful changes in dissolved salts or solutes. Some tardigrades can respond by entering a resistant state until conditions are safer. When the surrounding water becomes too concentrated, water balance inside the body can be threatened. There is no need to turn osmobiosis-linked stressful changes dissolved into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The more slowly we consider osmobiosis-linked stressful changes dissolved, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. A tiny animal must listen closely to the chemistry around it. Tardigrades are sometimes called moss piglets because of their shape and habitat. The phrase is gentle and a little funny, but it points to a real connection with mossy microhabitats. A simple phrase like tardigrades, sometimes called moss piglets, can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. It is one of those names that makes a scientific subject feel closer and easier to remember. A point like tardigrades, sometimes called moss piglets, is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. A soft nickname can carry a serious animal. The public loves tardigrades partly because they make scale feel strange. The mind enjoys that contrast because it turns a speck into a doorway. In the story of public loves tardigrades partly because there is room for both accuracy and wonder. A tiny animal can widen the room. They are smaller than we can easily see, yet they connect to outer space, radiation, ancient life, and future technology. In a calm voice, public loves tardigrades partly because they can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. In sleep-friendly storytelling, tardigrades offer a calm kind of wonder. They are not chasing, roaring, or threatening the listener. They are crawling through moss, folding into stillness, and returning with water. This detail about sleep-friendly storytelling, tardigrades offer calm matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. That quiet pattern is easy for the mind to follow at night. For a night listener, sleep-friendly storytelling, tardigrades offer calm is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. A tardigrade can make the ordinary feel cosmic. The path from moss to space is short in imagination, even if the animal itself moves slowly. A wet stone can lead to a microscope. The microscope can lead to cells, and cells can lead to questions about life beyond Earth. You can let tardigrade make ordinary feel cosmic, pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. For tardigrade make ordinary feel cosmic. The small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. Sometimes the universe begins in a drop. The animal's softness is part of its charm. Unlike armored beetles or sharp-jawed predators, a tardigrade often looks rounded and almost sleepy. The picture of animals' softness part charm does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. Its power is hidden not in muscles or teeth, but in states, molecules, and patience. The useful part of animals' softness part charm is that it does not need drama to hold attention. Soft things can be strong in quiet ways. The water bear's strength depends on not wasting energy. This is not weakness. It is a different strategy from constant motion. A fact like water bear's strength depends wasting also keeps the science honest. Sometimes the wisest movement is none at all. During dormancy, the body reduces ordinary activity instead of fighting the environment directly. If the room is quiet, water bear's strength depends wasting can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. A dry tardigrade may look lifeless. Without the story of cryptobiosis, it might be mistaken for debris or a dead speck. Only when water returns can the difference become visible as the animal slowly unfolds. When you think about tardigrade look lifeless, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. Life can hide so well that it seems absent. The body of the tardigrade makes tardigrade look lifeless feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. The return from a ton can be uneven. This variation makes the process more real than a simple miracle story. Some individuals recover quickly, some slowly, and some not at all, depending on conditions and damage. There is no need to turn return from uneven into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The quiet lesson in return from uneven is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. Recovery is a biological event, not a magic switch. The study of recovery can teach scientists about damage. By watching what happens after rehydration, researchers can investigate which systems restart, which are repaired, and which fail. A simple phrase like "study recovery," teach scientists about, can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. The moment after stress may reveal as much as the stress itself. With study recovery teach scientists about, the scene can stay very simple: a surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. Waking can be a window into survival. Tardigrades have become model organisms for certain questions. A model organism does not need to answer every question. It only needs to answer some questions especially well. The science behind tardigrades have become model organisms is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. The water bear has begun to earn its place at the laboratory table. They are not as widely used as fruit flies or roundworms, but interest is growing because of their size, resilience, and simple nervous systems. In a calm voice, tardigrades have become model organisms can sound almost like a bedtime object. Clear, slow, and easy to set down. Their transparency can help future research. If scientists can observe internal processes in living tardigrades, they may learn more about movement, dormancy, and recovery. Tiny, transparent animals are valuable because they let biology be watched from the inside. There is a soft kind of focus in their transparency help future research. A clear body can become a quiet classroom. For a night listener, their transparency help future research is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Tardigrades connect biology with material science. The animal is not a product or a promise, but a source of ideas. Protective proteins, drying tolerance, and cellular stabilization all interest researchers who think about preserving fragile things. You can let tardigrades connect biology with materials pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The more slowly we consider tardigrades connect biology with materials, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. Nature often solves engineering problems long before we name them. Their survival has inspired thoughts about vaccines and medicines. If scientists can understand how cells or molecules remain stable during drying, that knowledge might help with storage technologies in the future. The picture of their survival inspired thoughts about does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. This is a careful possibility, not a claim that tardigrades already solve human problems. A point like their survival inspired thoughts about is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. The best inspiration keeps its feet on the ground. Tardigrades also remind us that water is central to life. The whole story circles around moisture, its presence, absence, return, and memory. In the story of tardigrades also remind that water, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. Water is the quiet main character. Their active body needs water, and their dormant body is mostly a response to water being gone. If the room is quiet, tardigrades also remind that water can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. A moss cushion after rain is a perfect image for them. The green surface swells, films of water connect spaces, and tiny animals begin moving again. To us, it may be only a fresh smell after weather. To them, it may be the reopening of a world. This detail about moss cushion after rain perfect matters because it keeps the animal grounded in real life, not in legend. Rain can be an invitation. The body of the tardigrade makes moss cushion after rain perfect feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. Dry weather closes that same world. The tardigrade's answer is not panic, but contraction, chemistry, and stillness. Water films shrink, food becomes harder to reach, and activity may become dangerous or impossible. There is no need to turn weather closes that same world into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. For weather closes that same world, the small scale changes everything. Surfaces become paths, drops become pools, and ordinary textures become shelter. Dryness turns the animal into a waiting shape. The rhythm of wet and dry can shape tardigrade evolution. Habitats that repeatedly dry and re-wet favor organisms that can survive interruption. A simple phrase like rhythm, shape tardigrade evolution, can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. Over long time, this ordinary cycle may help produce extraordinary tolerance. The useful part of rhythm-shaped tardigrade evolution is that it does not need drama to hold attention. A repeated inconvenience can become an evolutionary lesson. Tardigrades are part of the great story of small resilience. The water bear is special, but it is also one member of a larger family of strategies for waiting. A fact like tardigrades, part great story, small, also keeps the science honest. Life has many quiet ways to continue. Many microscopic organisms survive by forming cysts, spores, eggs, or resting stages. In a calm voice, tardigrades, part great story small, can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. Their fame should not make us forget other tiny creatures. Rotifers, nematodes, mites, springtails, microbes, and algae all share the hidden habitats around tardigrades. The water bear is a doorway into the wider miniature world, not the whole room. When you think about their fame should make forget, the animal becomes less like a headline and more like a body moving through a place. One beloved animal can lead us toward many unseen lives. For a night listener, their fame should make forget is a good place to rest attention because it is small, visual, and not rushed. Tardigrades can be found by amateurs with simple equipment. Not every sample will reveal one quickly, but the search itself changes how a person sees ordinary surfaces. A microscope, a sample of moss, water, patience, and a careful eye may be enough to begin looking. You can let tardigrades found amateurs with simple pass through the mind slowly, the way light passes through a microscope slide. The quiet lesson in tardigrades found amateurs with simple is that life can be complete even when it is almost invisible to us. Curiosity can make a garden feel new. The first time someone sees a tardigrade can be unforgettable. A tiny speck begins to move with legs, claws, and purpose, and the mind suddenly understands that the invisible world is alive. The picture of first time someone sees tardigrade does not demand alarm. It asks only for a little patient noticing. It is not just a science fact, it is a change in attention. With first time someone sees tardigrade, the scene can stay very simple. A surface, a little water, and a creature built for that scale. The world becomes deeper without becoming louder. Tardigrades invite a slower kind of thinking. They do not fit well with hurry, which makes them perfect for a quiet night. The science behind tardigrades invites slower, kind thinking, is a reminder to be careful with exaggeration. Some subjects seem to lower the volume of the mind. Their lives unfold in hidden films of water. Their survival can involve long waiting, and their movements are small and patient. If the room is quiet, tardigrades invite slower, kind thinking can become one of those small facts that keeps curiosity soft. The water bear is both ordinary and extraordinary. It lives in common places, eats small foods, molts, lays eggs, and crawls through wet habitats. Yet it can also enter states that make laboratories, spacecraft experiments, and genetic studies pay attention. There is a soft kind of focus in water bear, both ordinary, extraordinary. The ordinary and the astonishing are not always separate. The body of the tardigrade makes water bear both ordinary, extraordinary, feel practical, not abstract, because every detail belongs to survival. A single tardigrade contains many scales of time. All of these times meet inside one small body. There is the moment of a step, the day of rain, the season of drying, the years of scientific study, and the deep history of its lineage. There is no need to turn single tardigrade contains many scales into a miracle. The plain version is already strange enough. The more slowly we consider single tardigrade contains many scales, the more the scale of the animal begins to make sense. Tiny animals can hold long clocks. The story of the tardigrade is not about domination. It does not survive by ruling its habitat or overpowering larger animals. A simple phrase like "story tardigrade" about domination can open a surprisingly large space when the scale becomes microscopic. It survives by fitting into small spaces, pausing when needed, and returning when conditions allow. A point like "story tardigrade" about domination is also useful because it connects the famous survival story to ordinary anatomy and behavior. There is a gentle kind of power in not needing to be seen. As the night grows quieter, the tardigrade becomes a fitting image. Its life suggests that stillness can be active in ways we cannot easily see. In the story of Night Grows Quieter, tardigrade becomes, there is room for both accuracy and wonder. A resting world may still be preparing to wake. It is small, slow, patient, and connected to water, moss, sleep-like dormancy, and return. In a calm voice, night grows quieter, tardigrade can sound almost like a bedtime object, clear, slow, and easy to set down. The tardigrade also reminds us that small animals are not simple in the way people sometimes imagine. A creature can be tiny and still have body layers, muscles, nerves, a digestive tract, eggs, senses, and behavior. It can respond to light, moisture, touch, temperature, food, and danger. This does not make it human-like, and it does not make it mysterious in a false way. It simply means that life has many levels. Some levels are large enough to see from a road or a window. Others wait under glass, in a drop of water, where a whole living body can be smaller than a printed dot. There is another reason to keep the language careful. Tardigrades are often called nearly indestructible, but that phrase can hide the real science. Many experiments use selected species, prepared states, and controlled conditions. A dried ton may survive something that an active, wet animal cannot. One species may tolerate a stress better than another. An egg, a juvenile, and an adult may not respond in the same way. The details matter. They make the story more honest, and honesty gives the listener something firmer to rest on. The word cryptobiosis can sound technical, but the basic idea is not hard to understand. It means hidden life, or life with ordinary activity reduced so far that the animal seems paused. The body is not simply sleeping like a cat in sunlight. It is not living in the usual active way. It is waiting in a special state until the world becomes possible again. That idea can feel strange, but it is also calm. A tiny animal becomes still and time passes around it. When water returns, recovery is not a magic switch. The body must rehydrate, restore shape, and restart the ordinary work of cells. Some tardigrades recover well, some do not. Time, temperature, species, and damage all matter. This makes the image more believable. A ton is not a perfect shield. It is a careful way to reduce harm. And because it is not perfect, the survival that does happen feels more real. The best sleep science subjects do not need to shout. They let the mind rest on one clear picture. For the tardigrade, that picture might be a small moss forest after rain. A body with 8 little legs is crossing a wet surface. The world around it is not empty, only too small for our normal attention. Then the weather changes, the water thins, and the animal folds into stillness. The picture is simple enough to follow and deep enough to keep. Even the names help the mood. Water bear sounds soft and familiar. Moss piglet sounds almost playful. Tardigrade sounds older and more scientific. Each name shows a different way people have tried to understand the same small creature. One name notices how it walks. Another notices where it lives. Another comes from the idea of slow stepping. A good name is like a handle on a hidden world. It lets the mind pick up something too small to hold. A tardigrade has no lungs in the way larger animals do. Gas exchange can happen across body surfaces, helped by the animal's very small size. Small bodies do not face the same problems as large bodies. A creature the size of a tardigrade can use simple physical rules that would not work for an elephant, a whale, or a person. Size changes the design of life, and this small rule helps the water bear remain simple without being empty. Many tardigrades have simple eye spots, though not every species has them. These eye spots do not create a rich picture like human eyes do. They can help with light and darkness, giving the animal information about its surroundings. For a creature in moss or sediment, even a simple sense of light can matter. It can guide movement without needing anything loud or complicated. The nervous system of a tardigrade is small, but it still coordinates walking, feeding, and response. Its legs do not move at random. The body can search, grip, turn, and continue across a surface. Researchers are interested in this because it shows how a very small animal can organize behavior with a compact nervous system. The result is a living body using a small set of tools well. Some tardigrades lay eggs with beautiful surface patterns. Under magnification, the eggs can show bumps, ridges, crowns, or other shapes that help researchers tell species apart. This is one of the places where the water bear becomes unexpectedly delicate. The famous adult may be known for survival, but the egg can be known for form. A hidden world can have ornament without needing an audience. Tardigrades are part of a much larger lesson about moisture. So many small lives depend on water held in tiny places, between moss leaves, under soil particles, in films on algae, or inside sediments. To us, these may look like dry or ordinary surfaces. To a microanimal, they can be paths, walls, rooms, and feeding grounds. Water does not have to be a lake to become a world. Some research on tardigrades is useful because it asks careful questions rather than chasing a headline. How does a body dry without falling apart? How do proteins help protect cells? How does an animal restart after a pause? These questions are quiet, but they reach into deep parts of biology. They also remind us that good science often begins with patient observation. The word tune is short, but the image is strong. A soft animal folds into a small dry form with its legs drawn in and its activity reduced. It looks almost like the body has placed itself into storage. That image should not be stretched too far because the animal is not a machine. Still, it helps explain why water returning can be such an important event. The story of the tardigrade is also a story about scale. A person may look at a stone wall and see nothing moving. A microscope may show lichens, algae, tiny spaces, and animals that were hidden from ordinary sight. The wall did not change. Attention changed. That is one of the calmest gifts of science. It teaches the eye to see more without needing the world to become louder. One quiet fact about tardigrades is that their famous toughness is usually linked to a pause in normal life. Active tardigrades still need water, food, and suitable surroundings. The dry ton is different. It is a protected state, a way of reducing ordinary activity when the world has become too harsh. That difference keeps the story clear. A water bear is not walking happily through every extreme place. Often it is waiting, sealed into a simpler shape until the ordinary world becomes possible again. The surface of moss can hold more life than it seems. Water gathers between the leaves and stems in very small pockets. Algae can grow there. Tiny animals can feed there. Eggs can rest there. A tardigrade moving through moss is not crawling across a flat green mat. It is crossing a rough, wet place full of edges, spaces, food, and shelter. That image is useful because it brings the animal back from myth into a real habitat. A microscope changes the feeling of size. Something that looked like dust becomes a body. Something that looked like a stain becomes a habitat. Something that looked empty begins to move. This is one reason tardigrades are so good for a calm science story. They do not require a huge landscape to create wonder. The large feeling comes from noticing the small thing properly. A drop of water can become wide when the eye slows down. The claws of tardigrades are more than decoration. Their shapes help the animal grip surfaces, and they also help scientists tell species apart. One water bear may have a different claw pattern from another, even when both look similar at first glance. This is the kind of detail that rewards patient looking. A tiny foot can become a taxonomic clue. A small curve can help place an animal in the larger map of life. The mouth parts are also part of the story. Many tardigrades use stylets to pierce cells or small prey. The feeding action is not large or violent at our scale. It is a tiny exchange of pressure, tissue, and nourishment. That makes the animal feel less like a mascot and more like a working organism. It must find food. It must take in energy. It must live inside an ecosystem, even if that ecosystem is smaller than a raindrop. Some tardigrades are plant feeders, some feed on algae, and some can prey on other small animals. This variety matters because it shows that water bears are not all doing the same thing. A single nickname covers many lives. In one wet patch, a tardigrade may graze quietly. In another, a different species may hunt at a microscopic scale. The calm version of the story can still include conflict, but it does not need to sound harsh. The cuticle gives the body shape, but it also has to be replaced as the animal grows. Molting is a small reset. The old covering is left behind, and the body continues with a new surface. Some species can use the shed cuticle in interesting ways, including as a place connected with egg laying. That detail feels almost domestic at a microscopic scale. The old covering is not only waste, in some cases it becomes part of the next step. Eggs make the water bear story softer and stranger. Under magnification, tardigrade eggs can show patterns that look carefully made. Some have little projections, rough surfaces, or shapes that help researchers recognize the species. There is no reason for a human viewer to see them in ordinary life, yet the forms are there. Nature often carries detail far below the level where people usually look. The hidden world is not plain just because it is hidden. Tardigrades are often linked with space, but the space story needs careful wording. Selected tardigrades have survived certain exposures in experiments, especially when dehydrated. Vacuum alone is not the same as full sunlight, ultraviolet radiation, and long-term life beyond Earth. The animal can survive some harsh exposure. It does not live an active life in open space. This correction does not weaken the story. It makes the strange part believable. Radiation is another place where the wording should stay calm. Some tardigrades have tools that help them resist or repair damage better than many animals. One famous protein, D-sup, has been studied because of its connection with DNA protection. But that does not mean every tardigrade is protected in the same way or that the animal is immune to radiation. Biology is always more specific than a headline. Specific facts are better for trust. Heat is a good example of why the myth needs limits. Tardigrades are famous for extreme survival, but active animals can be vulnerable. A resistant state may tolerate a stress that a moving, feeding animal cannot. Duration also matters. A short exposure is not the same as a long one. The listener does not need every laboratory detail to understand the point. The water bear is tough, but not outside the rules of damage. Cold can also be understood through the idea of states. In some conditions, some tardigrades can endure deep cold, especially when ordinary activity has been reduced. The cold does not become comfortable. It becomes survivable under certain conditions. That difference gives the story a calmer shape. The animal is not conquering the environment. It is reducing risk, waiting, and depending on a body plan that can handle interruption better than most. The tongue shape is one of the clearest images in the whole subject. The legs pull in, the body contracts. The soft, moving animal becomes a small, dry form. It can look almost like the creature has folded itself into a comma in the sentence of life. The image is simple enough to remember without pressure. It also explains why water is so important. When moisture returns, the paused sentence may continue. Not every tardigrade becomes a ton in the same way, and not every species survives the same stresses. That variation is part of good science. It stops the story from becoming a cartoon. Different species have different tools, different habitats, and different limits. Even within one group of animals, survival is not a single switch. It is a set of strategies shaped by time, place, chemistry, and the small accidents of life. The word extremotolerant is often more useful than extremophile. Many tardigrades do not seek extreme places as their favorite home. They may live in ordinary moss, soil, fresh water, or marine sediment. Their survival states help when the ordinary place becomes temporarily harsh. That is a quieter and more accurate picture. The animal is not looking for danger. It is prepared for changes that come to small, wet habitats. The tardigrade body is short and compact, but it is not careless in design. Its legs, claws, mouthparts, cuticle, gut, and nervous system all belong to a working animal. Under a microscope, the body may look cute, almost like a toy, but the cuteness can hide the reality that it must solve real problems. It must move, feed, grow, reproduce, and survive. Smallness does not remove responsibility from the body. There are marine tardigrades as well as freshwater and land-associated forms. This makes the topic wider than moss alone. Some live among sand grains and sediments where the spaces between particles become a kind of miniature landscape. The seafloor can be enormous to us, but a single grain can matter to a tiny animal. That shift in scale gives the ocean story a smaller, calmer doorway. Freshwater tardigrades can live in ponds, streams, and wet sediments. These places may look still from above, but under magnification, they are full of motion. A pond is not only fish, reeds, and reflections, it is also a world of small organisms moving through water and surfaces. The tardigrade belongs to that quiet crowd. It gives the pond another layer, one that the eye would miss without help. Lichens add another kind of setting. They grow on bark, rock, walls, and old surfaces, holding moisture when the weather allows. To a tardigrade, that rough surface may be enough. It does not need a forest in the human sense. It needs tiny pockets where water can gather and life can continue. A wall after rain can become more than a wall. It can become a small, temporary country. Soil is also a hidden world. Between grains of mineral and pieces of organic matter, water and air create tiny spaces. Many small animals and microbes live in those spaces, and tardigrades can be part of that community. The soil underfoot is not just brown material. It is layered, active, and full of relationships. Thinking about a tardigrade there can make the ground feel deeper without making the story heavy. Tardigrades are sometimes transparent enough for internal features to be seen. That transparency gives them a strange beauty under the lens. The body becomes partly visible from the inside, like a soft window into a small life. This is not beauty in the usual large animal way. It is quieter than that. It is the beauty of seeing function, shape, and fragility at the same time. Their colors can be muted, clear, pale, yellowish, greenish, reddish, or brownish, depending on species and body contents. These are not display colors like a bright bird wing. They are small tones from a hidden habitat. The water bear often looks as if it belongs to damp moss, old leaves, algae, soil, and sediment. Its colors do not shout. They help the animal feel like part of the material world around it. Tardigrades have been known to science since the 18th century, when observers began describing them under early microscopes. That history matters because it reminds us that wonder is not new. People have been surprised by the small world for a long time. Each generation receives better tools, sharper lenses, and new questions. But the basic feeling remains familiar. A small creature appears where the unaided eye saw nothing. The name slow walker is a helpful name for sleep. It does not push the mind forward. It gives the whole animal a pace. The legs move slowly, the body presses forward, and the scene feels almost underwater even when it is in moss. A subject like that can hold attention without tightening it. The water bear does not sprint through the night. It crosses a tiny surface one small step at a time. A good long sleep script needs facts that can be understood without effort. Tardigrades offer that. They are small animals. They live in wet microhabitats. Some can pause when conditions become harsh. They can return when water comes back. Scientists study them because the pause is biologically unusual. Each idea is plain on its own, but together they form a larger feeling. That is the right kind of complexity for night listening. There is also a useful emotional shape in this topic. The animal does not win by force. It does not chase, roar, or dominate the scene. It endures by becoming still, by fitting into tiny spaces, and by waiting for better conditions. That gives the story a slow arc without drama. It moves from water to dryness, from motion to pause, from pause back to motion. The pattern is simple and restful. When people hear about tardigrades for the first time, they often remember the extreme claims: space, radiation, dryness, freezing. But after the surprise passes, the more lasting image may be smaller, a rounded animal in moss walking with 8 little legs. That second image is better for sleep. It gives the mind a place to settle. The record is interesting, but the creature itself is the real subject. The most important rule for this kind of story is balance. If the script becomes too technical, it wakes the listener. If it becomes too vague, it loses value. Tardigrades let us stay in the middle. The science is real, the language can stay simple, and the images remain soft. A water bear under a microscope can carry enough wonder for a long night without ever needing to become loud. The water bear can also help make the idea of deep time feel small enough to hold. Tardigrades belong to an old branch of animal life, but the individual animal under the lens is doing ordinary work. It is feeding, moving, molting, or waiting. That contrast is useful for a long night script. The subject can touch large questions about evolution and survival while still returning to one soft body in a wet place. Big time and small life can sit together without noise. Another calm part of the topic is that tardigrades do not need a dramatic setting. A famous animal often needs a jungle, a desert, a mountain, or a deep ocean scene. The water bear can begin in a gutter, a roof tile, a piece of moss, or a thin green film on stone. This makes the world feel quietly richer. The strange creature is not far away. It may be close to ordinary places, waiting at a scale we usually pass over. For a 2-hour sleep video, this is a strong shape. The listener can move from body form to habitat, from food to eggs, from water to drying, from drying to recovery, and from recovery to the careful science behind the myth. The topic has enough variety to avoid boredom, but it does not become aggressive. It stays small, visual, and steady. That is the balance we want. Curiosity without pressure, science without sharp edges, and wonder without shouting. The simplest final image is still the best one. Imagine a dark field under the microscope and a small water bear moving through it. The legs press forward. The claws touch the surface. The body is soft but not helpless. Around it are bits of moss, tiny food, water, and shadow. Nothing about the scene is loud, yet it contains a whole animal life, complete enough to carry the mind gently toward rest. By now, the tardigrade may feel less like a strange headline and more like a small animal in its own real world. It is not magic, and it is not truly indestructible. It needs water when it is active. It needs food. It grows, molts, responds to its surroundings, and can be harmed by heat, radiation, time, and poor conditions. The truth is calmer than the myth, and also more interesting. What makes the water bear special is not that it escapes biology. It is that biology has given some tardigrades a way to pause. A wet animal can become a dry ton. A moving body can fold inward. A tiny creature can wait through conditions that would normally end active life. Then, if water and better conditions return, movement can begin again. That is a quiet kind of wonder. This is why tardigrades fit a night story so well. They bring together moss, water, stillness, small steps, hidden habitats, and patient survival. They remind us that a living world does not have to be loud to be deep. A damp stone can hold a habitat. A drop of water can hold a walker. A speck under a microscope can open a whole evening of thought. You do not need to hold every detail now. Let the names and facts drift away. Let the moss become soft. Let the microscope light fade. Somewhere in soil, lichen, sand, or a thin film of water, a tardigrade may be walking slowly. Somewhere else, one may be waiting as a ton until water returns. Both images can rest quietly in the back of the mind. If this calm kind of science helps you rest, you are welcome to return another night. Another quiet subject will be waiting. But for now, let the small water bear continue its slow walk somewhere beyond your attention. Sleep well and good night.